My daughter told me I was too poor to attend her dream wedding at the prestigious Rosewood Manor. But what she didn't know was that I owned the entire estate, and when she tried to humiliate me in front of her future in-laws by disinviting me for being financially embarrassing, the look of absolute horror on her face when the venue manager called her personally to cancel everything was worth every sleepless night. I'd spent building my empire from nothing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about one moment of betrayal. It's about 28 years of sacrifices that apparently meant nothing when my daughter decided I wasn't sophisticated enough for her perfect day. My name is Diana Hartwell, and I'm 52 years old. To most people in Millbrook Valley, I'm just the quiet woman who runs the small flower shop on Maple Street. You know, the type always has dirt under her fingernails, drives a 10-year-old Honda, shops at discount stores, and wears the same 3 cardigans in rotation. The kind of person who blends into the background at parent-teacher conferences and community events, unremarkable, forgettable, poor. That's exactly how I designed it. What my daughter Natalie, and frankly most of this town doesn't know, is that Diana Hartwell owns more property in Millbrook Valley than anyone else. The flower shop, it's just my hobby, my way of staying connected to the community I grew up in. My real business is Hartwell Holdings, a property development and management company that I built from absolutely nothing after I walked out when Natalie was 3 years old. 25 years ago, when Thomas left us with nothing but a mortgage we couldn't afford, and a toddler who kept asking where Daddy went, I made a choice. I could either feel sorry for myself, or I could make sure my daughter never wanted for anything. So while she slept, I studied. While she was at school, I worked 3 jobs. While she played with friends on weekends, I was learning about real estate property law and investment strategies. The first property I bought was a rundown duplex on the wrong side of town. I lived in one half with Natalie and rented out the other. Then I bought another, and another. Each property I purchased, I renovated myself. I learned plumbing, electrical work, carpentry, anything that would save money and increase value. My hands became permanently stained with paint and calloused from manual labor, but my bank account grew. By the time Natalie was in high school, I owned 12 rental properties. By her college graduation, it was 37. Today, at 28, she has no idea that her poor mother owns 43 properties throughout Millbrook Valley, including the crown jewel of the county, Rosewood Manor. Rosewood Manor isn't just any wedding venue. It's a 19th century estate sitting on 50 acres of pristine countryside, complete with formal gardens, a private lake, and a ballroom that has hosted senators, celebrities, and old money families for generations. It's the kind of place that books 2 years in advance and costs more for one evening than most people make in 6 months. I bought it 3 years ago, when the previous owners, the prestigious Whitmore family, fell into financial ruin. They had to sell quietly to avoid public humiliation. I paid cash through my holding company and kept the transaction as private as possible. The staff still calls me Mrs. Hartwell when I visit for business, but to them I'm just another property owner checking on her investment. They have no idea I'm the same Diana who arranges flowers for their lobby twice a week. I never told Natalie about any of this because I wanted her to understand the value of hard work, to appreciate what she had, and to treat people with respect regardless of their apparent station in life. I figured there would be time to explain everything later. Maybe when she got married, maybe when I decided to retire, I thought I was raising a daughter who would be proud of how far we'd come together. I was wrong. Last month, when Natalie announced her engagement to Bradley Whitfield, son of one of the wealthiest families in the neighboring county, I was genuinely happy for her. She'd found someone who clearly adored her, and despite their obvious wealth, Bradley had always been polite and kind during our few interactions. But then came the wedding planning conversations, and I began to see a side of my daughter I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I had noticed, but chose to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. "We're thinking Rosewood Manor," she told me over dinner at her apartment, her voice taking on that dreamy quality she got when discussing anything expensive. "It's absolutely perfect, Mom. Bradley's parents have connections there, and they think they can get us in even though they're usually booked solid." I nearly choked on my wine. My own daughter was planning to get married at my venue and she had no idea. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart, I mean, but isn't that quite expensive?" She waved her hand dismissively. Bradley's parents are handling most of the costs. They insist on paying for everything because they want it to be perfect. You know how important appearances are to families like theirs. Families like theirs, not families like ours. Of course, I said carefully, I'd like to contribute something to my daughter's wedding. That's when her expression changed. The dreamy look vanished, replaced by something that made my stomach clench with dread. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone adults use with children who don't understand grown-up things. "That's so sweet of you, but really you don't need to worry about it. I know money is tight for you, and this wedding is going to be, well, it's going to be quite grand. The kind of event that costs more than you could probably manage." I felt like she'd slapped me. "Natalie, I think you might be surprised by what I could manage." She reached across the table and patted my hand in a way that felt more condescending than comforting. "I love that you want to help, I really do. But this isn't going to be some small budget wedding. We're talking about 150 guests, premium everything, live orchestra, imported flowers. The dress alone costs more than you probably make in 6 months at the flower show." I pulled my hand back slowly. "I see." "Don't take it the wrong way," she continued, clearly missing the warning signs in my voice. "It's just that Bradley's family moves in certain circles, and the wedding needs to reflect that. You understand, right? It's not personal, it's just business. Image matters in their world again, not our world." That conversation happened 3 weeks ago, and it was just the beginning of what would become the most painful month of my life. Because what came next made it clear that my daughter didn't just think I was too poor to contribute to her wedding, she thought I was too poor, too common, too embarrassing to even attend it. And that's when I realized that maybe it was time for Natalie to learn exactly who her mother really was. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The moment I discovered just how far my daughter's embarrassment of me went wasn't through a heart-to-heart conversation or even an argument. It was through a group text message that I was never supposed to send. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was at the flower shop doing inventory when my phone buzzed with what I thought was a message from Natalie. Instead, I found myself accidentally added to a group chat titled Natalie's Wedding Squad that included her maid of honor, 3 bridesmaids, and Bradley's sister Vivian. The message that popped up made my blood run cold. Vivian Whitfield. "So we're all clear on the story for Saturday's venue walkthrough, right? If anyone asks about Natalie's family situation, we keep it vague. Bradley's parents are already nervous about the financial disparities, maid of honor." Rebecca got it. But what if his mom directly asks about Natalie's parents? She's been pretty pointed about wanting to meet them. Natalie, just say, "My dad isn't in the picture, and my mom is." Simple works with flowers, keep it light, and change the subject quickly. "I love her, but she's not exactly Whitfield family material, you know." I stared at my phone screen, reading and rereading those words. Simple works with flowers, not exactly Whitfield family material. The conversation continued, and each message felt like another knife to my chest. Bridesmaid Ashley. "What about the rehearsal dinner? Won't she be there, Natalie?" That's still being discussed. Bradley's parents want to keep it intimate, just immediate family and wedding part. I'm trying to figure out how to handle the mom situation without making it awkward for everyone. Vivian, honestly, maybe it's better if she just comes to the ceremony. Like she can sit in the back, watch her daughter get married, and then we do the reception with people who actually fit the vibe. No offense, but mixing social circles can be so uncomfortable for everyone involved. Natalie, that's actually not a bad idea. Mom would probably be more comfortable that way anyway. She gets so nervous around wealthy people. Remember when she met Bradley's parents for the first time? She was practically shaking and could barely string a sentence together. I remembered that dinner. I had been nervous, but not because I was intimidated by their wealth. I was nervous because I could feel their judgment, their subtle condescension, and I was trying my best not to let my real personality slip through. The personality of a woman who could buy and sell their country club membership without blinking. Rebecca. So she's definitely not coming to the reception. Natalie, how could she? The reception is going to be at Rosewood Manor. Do you know what that place costs per person? It's literally more than she makes in a month. She wouldn't even know which fork to use or how to talk to the other guests. It would be mortifying for everyone. I had to set my phone down and take several deep breaths. My own daughter was discussing my exclusion from her wedding reception like it was a kindness, like she was protecting me from my own inadequacy. Ashley. But won't people ask where the mother of the bride is during the reception? Natalie, we'll just say she had to leave early, family emergency or something. Honestly, most of Bradley's family won't even notice. They don't exactly move in circles where they'd expect to socialize with people like my mom. People like my mom. I scrolled up to see if there were earlier messages I'd missed, and what I found made everything so much worse. The conversation had started 3 days earlier. Natalie, okay girls, I need to talk through something that's been stressing me out. Bradley's family is paying for this entire wedding, and his mother has been making comments about wanting to meet my people and understand my background. Vivian, what kind of comments, Natalie? Just you know how Mrs. Whitfield is. She's very particular about family lineage and social standing. She keeps asking about my mother's family, what they do, where I get my refined tastes from. I've been vague, but I think she's starting to suspect that my background isn't as polished as Bradley might have led them to believe. Rebecca, what did you tell them, Natalie? I've been emphasizing my education, my job at the marketing firm, my apartment in the nice part of town. But the truth is, if Mrs. Whitfield meets my mom and sees how she lives, how she dresses, the way she talks, I'm worried it might change how they see me. Ashley, but your mom seems sweet. Natalie, she is sweet, but sweet doesn't cut it in the Whitfield world. These people summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen. They think a weekend getaway means flying to Paris. My mom drives a Honda with a dent in the side, and her idea of fine dining is Olive Garden. Can you imagine her trying to make conversation with people who own horses and yachts? Actually, I thought I could imagine it quite well. I'd done it before many times in boardrooms and at high-end property negotiations. The difference was that in those settings, I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't. Vivian, so what's the plan? You can't hide her forever. Natalie, I'm thinking minimal exposure. She comes to the ceremony, sits with some of my distant relatives in the back, watches me walk down the aisle, maybe takes a few photos, then she can head home before the reception. I'll tell everyone she wasn't feeling well or had another commitment. Rebecca, won't she be hurt by that? Natalie, she'll understand. Mom's always been realistic about her place in the world. She knows she's not comfortable in fancy settings, and she wouldn't want to embarrass me or make anyone else uncomfortable. This way, she gets to see me get married, and I don't have to worry about her accidentally saying something inappropriate or wearing something that doesn't fit the dress code. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through message after message of my daughter systematically planning my humiliation. But it was the most recent message sent, just an hour before I'd been accidentally added to the group, that broke my heart completely. Natalie, you guys are the best for helping me figure this out. I just want everything to be perfect, and having to worry about my mom fitting in was honestly keeping me up at night. This way, I can just focus on marrying the man of my dreams at the most beautiful venue in the county without any complications, the most beautiful venue in the count. My venue. The venue where I'd spent 3 years carefully restoring every inch of original woodwork, where I'd personally overseen the renovation of the kitchen and the installation of the sound system, where I'd walked through every room planning how to make it the perfect setting for exactly this kind of event. My daughter, my only child, the person I'd built this entire empire for, was planning to exclude me from celebrating the most important day of her life at the very place I'd created as a legacy for her future. I sat there in my little flower shop, surrounded by the simple, honest work that had become my cover story, and realized that I'd raised a strange. Somewhere along the way, the little girl who used to help me plant flowers and who cried when other kids made fun of my work clothes had grown into a woman who was ashamed of everything I'd sacrificed to give her a better life. But what hurt most wasn't her embarrassment. It was the casual cruelty of it all, the way she'd discussed my exclusion like it was a logistics problem to solve, rather than the devastating rejection of the person who'd loved her unconditionally for 28 years. I took a screenshot of the entire conversation before removing myself from the group chat. Then I sat in the quiet of my shop, surrounded by the scent of roses and baby's breath, and began planning exactly how my daughter was going to learn who her mother really was. Because if Natalie wanted a wedding at Rosewood Manor without any complications, I was more than happy to arrange that for her. After all, I was the owner, and it was time she learned that some complications are harder to eliminate than others. I didn't sleep that night. By 3 a.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at the screenshots of that group chat conversation. Every time I read those messages, a new detail cut deeper. The casual way Vivian had suggested I sit in the back, the clinical precision with which Natalie had planned my exclusion, the assumption that I would simply accept whatever scraps of my daughter's wedding day she deemed appropriate to throw my way. But what bothered me most was how confident they all seemed, that I would never find out, how certain Natalie was that her simple mother would just grateful for whatever minimal involvement she allowed. By sunrise, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her about the group chat, not yet. Instead, I was going to give her the opportunity to tell me the truth herself. I was going to see if my daughter would look me in the eye and lie to me about my own exclusion. I called her Thursday morning, my voice carefully neutral. "Sweetheart, I was thinking about the wedding planning, and I realized we haven't really talked about my role in everything. When is the venue walkthrough? I'd love to see Rosewood Manor." There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "Oh, Mom, that's this Saturday, but it's really just for the wedding party, and Bradley's parents, boring logistical stuff, nothing you'd be interested in. Lie number one, of course I'd be interested. It's my daughter's wedding venue." Well, the thing is, they limit how many people can come on these tours, insurance liability or something. And Bradley's parents are bringing their wedding planner, and she's bringing her photographer to scout lighting. Her voice was getting higher the way it always did when she was making things up. It's going to be really crowded and chaotic. Lie number 2. What about the rehearsal dinner then? When should I plan to be there? Another pause longer this time. "Actually, Mom, we've decided to keep the rehearsal dinner really small, just immediate family and the wedding party. You know how Bradley's parents are about intimate gathering." Lie number 3, and the most painful one, because she was excluding me from immediate family. "Natalie," I said quietly, "am I invited to your wedding reception?" The silence that followed was so long I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Of course you're invited, Mom. Why would you even ask that?" But her voice had changed. It was the careful, measured tone she used when she was trying to control a conversation. "I'm asking because I want to understand what my role is in all of this. It feels like I'm being kept at arm's length from everything. You're being dramatic. You're my mother, of course you're included." "Included how exactly?" "Because it sounds like I'm not welcome at the venue tour, not welcome at the rehearsal dinner, and you've been vague about everything else." I heard her take a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice had taken on that patronizing tone I'd come to dread. "Look, Mom, I think maybe we need to have an honest conversation about expectations here." "I think we do. The truth is this wedding it's a big deal. Bradley's family has certain standards, certain ways of doing things, and I need everything to go perfectly, because this isn't just about one day, it's about how his family sees me, how they accept me into their world, and how do I fit into that?" Another part, well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, you'll be at the ceremony, obviously, and we'll take beautiful family photos, but the reception is going to be very formal, very upscale, the kind of event where people talk about politics and business things you might not be comfortable with. There it was. Not that she wouldn't be comfortable having me there, that I wouldn't be comfortable being there. You think I can't handle a formal dinner party? It's not that simple, Mom. These people, they're different from us. They talk about their vacation homes in Europe and their children's private schools and their stock portfolios. What would you even talk to them about? Flower arrangements. The dismissiveness in her voice when she said flower arrangements hit me like a physical blow. She had no idea that I'd sat in boardrooms with people exactly like the Whitfields negotiating deals worth millions of dollars. No idea that I probably had more money in my stock portfolio than most of her precious guests had in their entire net worth. So what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we be realistic about what works for everyone. You come to the ceremony, we take some lovely photos, and then you can head home before the reception gets into full swing. That way, you get to see me get married, but you don't have to sit through hours of small talk with people you have nothing in common with. And this was your idea. It's what makes the most sense. Her voice was getting defensive now. "Mom, I'm trying to protect you here. Do you really want to spend 4 hours making awkward conversation with people who summer in Martha's Vineyard? You'd be miserable." Would I be miserable? Or would you be embarrassed? The question hung in the air like a blade. That's not fair, isn't it? Because it sounds like you've decided that your poor, simple mother who works with flowers isn't sophisticated enough for your new family. I never said that. You didn't have to say it, but I'd like to hear you say what you do mean. Clearly no dancing around it. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, and I knew she was trying to figure out how to say what she really meant without sounding as cruel as she actually was being. Fine, you want honesty. The truth is that Bradley's family operates in a very specific social circle. They have expectations about the kind of people they associate with. And while I love you and while you've done your best to raise me, the reality is that you're not. You don't have the background or the education or the social graces that would make you comfortable in their world. Go on. Mom, you shop at Target. You drive a car that's older than some of Bradley's cousins. You've never been on an airplane, never eaten at a restaurant that requires reservations. These people own businesses and sit on charity boards and have advanced degrees from Ivy League school. What would you possibly have to talk to them about? Each word was like a scalpel precisely cutting away 28 years of love and sacrifice. And you think that means I shouldn't be at my own daughter's wedding reception. I think it means we should be smart about how we handle this. I think it means we should consider what's best for everyone involved. Everyone except me, that's not. Look, Mom, I knew you'd make this difficult. This is exactly why I didn't want to have this conversation, because you knew it would reveal exactly how little you think of me. Because I knew you'd take it personally instead of understanding that this is about bigger things than your feelings, bigger things than your feelings. My daughter, the child I'd worked 3 jobs to support the girl I'd put through college without her taking on a single dollar of debt, the woman whose entire comfortable life had been built on my sacrifice, had just told me that her social climbing was more important than my feelings. I sock you because I really need you to understand that this isn't about you not being good enough or me not loving you. It's about reality. It's about what makes sense. What makes sense? What makes sense is that you come to the ceremony, you watch me marry the man I love. We take some beautiful photos together, and then you go home knowing that you were part of the most important day of my life. Isn't that enough? Isn't that enough? After everything I'd given her, after every sacrifice I'd made, after building an empire I'd planned to leave to her someday, she was asking if watching her ceremony from the back row before being dismissed like hired help was enough. You know what, Natalie? You're absolutely right. I am. You are. You should absolutely have the wedding that makes sense for you. You should surround yourself with exactly the kind of people you want to associate with, and you shouldn't have to worry about anyone who might not fit your vision of perfection. Oh, Mom. Thank you for understanding. I knew I'm not finished. You should have exactly the wedding you deserve at exactly the venue you deserve, with exactly the guests you deserve. Something in my tone must have registered because her voice became uncertain. What do you mean? I mean that you're a grown woman who's made her choices very clear, and now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. Mom, you're scaring me. What consequences? What are you talking about? You'll find out soon enough. Sweetheart, enjoy your venue walkthrough on Saturday. I'm sure it will be very educational. I hung up before she could respond for the first time in 3 days. I smiled because my daughter was about to learn that there's a big difference between what makes sense and what actually happens when you underestimate the wrong person. And I was about to teach her that lesson in the most expensive classroom in Millbrook Valley after I hung up on Natalie. I found myself walking through my house, really looking at it for the first time in years. The modest 2-bedroom ranch on Elm Street that I'd bought when she was 7 years old. The same house where she'd done homework at the kitchen table while I studied real estate law by lamplight. The same living room where we'd watch Disney movies on Friday nights when I was too exhausted from work to do anything else but hold her close and pretend that everything was going to be okay. I had kept this house intentionally simple, even as my wealth grew, while I could have afforded a mansion in the hills overlooking Millbrook Valley. I chose to stay here because I wanted Natalie to grow up. Understanding that happiness didn't come from material things, I wanted her to value people for who they were, not what they own. Looking back now, I could see all the moments where I'd failed to teach her that lesson. And worse, I could see all the moments where I'd unknowingly contributed to her shame about our station in life. The pattern had started so subtly that I'd missed it completely. When Natalie was in middle school, she began asking why we couldn't go on vacations. Like her classmates, Sarah's family went to Disney World, she'd say, or Emma got to go skiing in Colorado. I always had the same response. Vacations are expensive, sweetheart. Maybe someday when business is better. The truth was that business was excellent by the time she was 12. I was making more in a month than most families in Millbrook Valley made in a year. But I was terrified of spoiling her, of raising a child who expected everything to be handed to her, so I maintained the fiction that we were just getting by, that every dollar had to be carefully considered when she started high school, and her friends began getting cars for their 16th birthdays. Natalie came to me with a carefully prepared presentation about why she needed a car to not wanted needed. She'd made a PowerPoint presentation on our old computer complete with slides about safety and responsibility, and how having a car would help her get a part-time job to help the family finances. I bought her a used Honda Civic Reliable Safe, but nothing flashed. I told her we'd gotten a good deal from someone who owed me a favor for helping with their garden. The look of disappointment on her face when she saw it parked in our driveway still haunted me, not because she was ungrateful, but because I could see her mentally comparing it to the BMW Sarah had gotten or the new Jeep that Emma was driving to school. "It's perfect, Mom," she'd said, and I could hear the effort it took to sound enthusiastic. It's exactly what I needed, but I knew it wasn't what she wanted, and I began to notice how she parked it in the far corner of the school lot, how she never offered to drive her friends anywhere, how she always had an excuse for why someone else should pick her up when they went out on weekend. College was where the real damage began, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Natalie had earned a partial academic scholarship to State University, and I was so proud of her. But when we went to orientation and saw the other families, parents in expensive clothes, talking about their vacation homes and their children's study abroad plans, I watched something change in Natalie's face. "Mom, maybe you should dress up a little more for these events," she'd whispered to me after we met her roommate's parents, who were both doctors. I was wearing khakis and a nice blouse, the same outfit I wore to parent-teacher conferences. But suddenly I felt underdressed. What's wrong with what I'm wearing? Nothing's wrong with it. It's just these people are different. They notice things like clothes and shoes and stuff like that. I should have told her then that appearances didn't matter, that the content of someone's character was more important than the labels on their clothes. Instead, I found myself shopping for nicer outfits before visiting her at school, buying clothes. I never wore anywhere else. The lies started small when Natalie's friends asked what I did for work. She told them I was in real estate, technically true, but she said it in a way that implied I was an agent or broker, not someone who arranged flowers and lived in a small house on Elm Street. When they asked about her father, she said he was out of the picture, but never explained that he'd abandoned us when she was 3, leaving us with nothing but debt and broken promises by her sophomore year. Natalie had crafted an entire mythology about our family. According to her college friends, I was a successful businesswoman who preferred to live simply. Our house wasn't modest, it was charming and deliberately understated. My old Honda wasn't embarrassing. It was practical and environmentally conscious. I went along with it because I thought it was harmless. I thought she was just trying to fit in, and that eventually she'd outgrow her need to impress people with fictional versions of our life. I was wrong the summer after her junior year. Natalie brought home her boyfriend Marcus, not Bradley, a different boy from a wealthy family who she'd dated for 8 months. Marcus was polite enough, but I could see him taking inventory of our house. Noting the discount furniture and the outdated kitchen appliances, Natalie spent the entire weekend making excuses. Mom's renovating. Soon, she told him when he commented on the old-fashioned kitchen, she's just waiting for the right contractor. The house has such good bones, she said. When he raised an eyebrow at the carpet in the living room, Mom's planning to redo the floors next year. She's very particular about authenticity, she explained. When he asked why we didn't have a swimming pool like his family did, she believes in preserving the original character of the neighborhood lie after lie after lie. And I said, I told myself she was protecting my feelings, that she didn't want Marcus to look down on me. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Natalie was ashamed of me, and she was ashamed of the life we'd built. The breaking point with Marcus came when he suggested that Natalie spend the summer interning at his father's investment firm in the city, instead of coming home to work at the local flower nursery, as she'd planned. "You should think bigger than this," he told her, gesturing around our neighborhood during a walk one evening. "You're smart enough to do anything you want. Why limit yourself to this?" That night, after Marcus had gone to bed in our guest room, Natalie came to me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I think I want to take the internship in the city." "Of course, sweetheart. If that's what you want, it's just Marcus is right. I need to start thinking about my future, about the kind of life I want to build, and staying here working at the nursery, it's not going to get me where I want to go." I asked her where she wanted to go, and she couldn't give me a straight answer. She talked about opportunities and networking and building my professional brand, but she couldn't tell me what she actually wanted to do with her life. What she could tell me very clearly was what she didn't want. She didn't want to be associated with small-town life, with manual labor, with the kind of simple existence that had defined our family. Marcus and Natalie broke up the following semester, but the damage was done. She'd gotten a taste of what life could be like if she distanced herself from her background, and she decided she liked it when she graduated and got the job at the marketing firm. She moved to the nicest apartment complex in town. The kind of place with a fitness center and a doorman and granite countertop. She furnished it with expensive things, wore designer clothes, and began cultivating an image of sophistication that had nothing to do with the girl who used to help me plant marigolds in the front yard. And through it all, I supported her, not just emotionally, but financially. When she couldn't afford the security deposit on the apartment, I covered it. When her student loan payments were straining her budget, I helped with those too. When she wanted to buy a new car to maintain her professional image, I co-signed the loan every time she needed money. I was there, and every time I showed up to help, I could see her hoping that none of her neighbors would see me. The woman in the sensible shoes and the practical clothes who drove an old Honda, and clearly didn't belong in her carefully constructed new world. But I kept helping because she was my daughter. And because I thought that eventually she'd realize that I was proud of her success, that I didn't need her to be ashamed of where she came from. I kept helping because I thought that when she found the right person, someone who would love her for who she really was, not for the image she projected, she'd feel safe enough to let me back into her life fully when she started dating Bradley and told me he came from money. I was nervous, not because I cared about his wealth, but because I was afraid of what it would do to Natalie's already fragile relationship with her own background. But Bradley seemed different when I met him. He was genuinely warm and kind. He asked me questions about my flowers, complimented my cooking, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. For a few months, I thought maybe Natalie had finally found someone who would help her. Remember that family mattered more than appearances. I should have known better. Because the closer Natalie got to the Whitfield family, the more desperate she became to prove that she belonged in their world, and the more desperate she became to prove that the more she needed to distance herself from anything that might suggest otherwise. Including sitting in my simple living room that Thursday evening, I realized that I'd spent 28 years trying to teach my daughter the wrong lesson. I'd thought I was teaching her humility and the value of hard work. But what I'd actually taught her was that our life wasn't good enough, that we had to apologize for who we were. That success meant leaving your family behind tomorrow. I was going to start teaching her a very different lesson that evening. I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the filing cabinet in my home office and pulled out every folder related to Natalie's expenses. I needed to see the numbers. Needed to quantify exactly what my daughter's simple, poor mother had actually provided for her. Over the years, the first folder was labeled Education, and it was 3 inches thick. Natalie's college tuition alone had cost me $27,000 over 4 years. Not because I couldn't get financial aid. Our family income was low enough on paper that she qualified for significant assistance, but I had quietly supplemented every scholarship, every grant, every loan she received, so that she would graduate debt-free while her classmates were taking out tens of thousands in student loans. I was making payments directly to the university's accounting office from a separate bank account she knew nothing about. The receipts told a story that made my chest tight with a mixture of pride and bitter iron. Her dormitory fees upgraded from the basic shared room to a private suite because she'd mentioned feeling claustrophobic sharing space the study abroad program in France. Her sophomore year, that cost $1 for a single semester, the unpaid internship in New York the summer before her senior year, where I covered her rent, food, and transportation costs because the networking opportunities were invaluable, but the position paid nothing. But education was just the beginning. The second folder was living expenses, and it documented a level of financial support that most parents couldn't dream of, providing the security deposit and first 3 months' rent on her luxury apartment. When she moved to town, the furniture I'd helped her buy at high-end stores because she wanted her place to make the right impression on colleagues called $1,000. The car down payment when she decided her college Honda wasn't professional enough. Then there were the smaller things that added up to staggering amounts over time, the monthly emergencies that always seemed to coincide with something she wanted but couldn't quite afford on her marketing salary. The designer clothes for important client meetings, the professional conference fees, the gym membership at the exclusive fitness club, where important contacts worked out the monthly hair and nail appointments that were essential for maintaining her image. I pulled out my calculator and started in the 5 years since Natalie had graduated college. I had quietly transferred $73,000 into her accounts for various necessities. Some of it was loans that she'd promised to pay back, but never mentioned again. Most of it was outright gifts disguised as help. During tough months, the third folder was the one that made me angriest: social expenses. These were the costs associated with helping Natalie maintain the lifestyle she felt she needed to fit in with her new social circle. The vacation to Napa Valley with her college friends that she couldn't afford but couldn't miss because everyone would notice if she wasn't there. $3, $200. The bridesmaid dress for her coworker's wedding that cost more than most people spent on their entire wardrobe. In a year, the housewarming party she threw when she moved to the luxury apartment complete with catered food and an open bar. My personal favorite was the receipt for her networking wardrobe, $500 spent in a single shopping trip because she'd been invited to a charity gala and needed something appropriate for that level of event. When I'd questioned whether one dress really needed to cost $1 or $200, she'd explained that it wasn't just about the dress, it was about the confidence that came from knowing she looked like she belonged. The irony was suffocating. I had been funding her efforts to distance herself from me. But the fourth folder was what broke my heart completely. Wedding fund. I had started this folder 8 months ago, the day after Natalie had called me breathless with excitement to tell me that Bradley had proposed, even before she'd asked for any help. Even before I knew what kind of wedding she wanted, I had opened a separate savings account and begun setting aside money for her special day. The plan had been simple. I would quietly cover whatever expenses the Whitfield family didn't handle, ensuring that my daughter could have the wedding of her dreams without any financial stress. I had already saved $45,000, and I'd been prepared to add more as need. The folder contained printouts of venue costs. I'd researched catering estimates, photography packages. I had spreadsheets comparing florists and musicians and wedding cake designer. I had been planning to surprise her with an offer to pay for whatever she needed most. The photographer maybe, or the flowers, or the honeymoon. I had been planning to give her a wedding gift that would have covered more than half the total cost of her Rosewood Manor celebration, sitting there surrounded by years of financial records. I calculated the total amount I had spent on Natalie since her 18th birthday, $200, more than $250,000 invested in a daughter who now considered me too embarrassing to include in her wedding reception. But money was only part of the sacrifice. The folders didn't capture the opportunity costs, the vacations I never took because I was saving for her education, the house renovations I postponed because she needed help with her apartment, the retirement contributions. I skipped because she was having a difficult month financially. They didn't document the social costs either, the times I'd turned down invitations to events because I was working extra hours to afford her expense, the friendships I'd let fade because I was always too busy or too tired from maintaining the dual life of successful property owner by day and struggling single mother by night. Most importantly, the folders couldn't capture the emotional cost of watching my daughter grow increasingly ashamed of everything I'd sacrificed to give her. I remembered the conversation we'd had just 6 months ago when she'd gotten a promotion at work. I had taken her out to dinner to celebrate, and over dessert she'd started talking about her 5-year plan. "I want to really establish myself in this industry," she'd said. "Eyes bright with ambition, build the right relationships, get invited to the right events, position myself for bigger opportunities." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. What kind of opportunities?" "There's talk of opening a new branch office, maybe in the state capital, or I might look into moving to a larger firm entirely, somewhere with more prestige, better clients." "And what about personal goals?" "Marriage, family, a home." She'd smiled and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "That's the beautiful thing about my relationship with Bradley. His family has connections everywhere. If we get married, I'd have access to a whole network of opportunities I could never reach on my own. If we get married. Not when. If." And she talked about his family's connections, not his love, or their compatibility, or their shared dreams for the future. "What about me?" I'd asked, trying to keep my voice light. "What's my role in this 5-year plan?" "Oh, Mom, you'll always be important to me. But you have to understand, I'm building something bigger than just our little family. I'm creating a life that has real influence, real impact. And sometimes that means making difficult choices about which relationships to prioritize. She'd been telling me then that I was becoming expendable, and I'd been too naive to understand. I pulled out one more folder, one I'd never shown to anyone: Property Portfolio Future Plans. This folder contained the legal documents that would transfer ownership of all 43 properties to Natalie. Upon my death, the business succession plan that would make her the sole heir to Hartwell Holdings, the financial projections showing that she would inherit an estate worth approximately $12 million. I had spent 15 years building this empire with one goal: ensuring that my daughter would never have to struggle. The way I had struggled, she would inherit not just money, but passive income streams that would provide her with financial security for the rest of her life. And she had no idea any of it existed. The daughter who thought I was too poor to attend her wedding reception was actually the heir to one of the largest property portfolios in the county. The woman who worried that I couldn't afford to contribute to her wedding had been working herself to death to build her a fortune. The girl who was ashamed of her mother's simple life was about to inherit an empire that had been built entirely through the kind of hard work she now found embarrassing. I closed the folders and sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence of 28 years of love. Sacrifice and planning. Every dollar in those files represented time I'd given up, risks I'd taken, dreams I'd deferred. Every receipt was proof of how much I'd been willing to sacrifice for my daughter's happiness, and in return, she had decided I wasn't good enough to celebrate the most important day of her life. But as I sat there in my home office, surrounded by the documentation of everything I'd built for her, I realized something important. I didn't just have the power to withdraw my financial support going forward. I had the power to show her exactly what she'd been taking for granted all along. Tomorrow, Natalie and the Whitfield family were going to tour Rosewood Manor, the venue she was so excited to celebrate at. They were going to walk through the gardens. I'd restored the ballroom, I'd renovated the kitchen, I'd equipped with state-of-the-art appliance. They were going to plan their perfect wedding at the most prestigious venue in the county, and they were going to do it without having any idea that they were walking through my property, planning their celebration in my building, relying on my staff to make their dreams come true. But that was about to change, because it was time for my daughter to learn that the woman she considered too poor and too embarrassing for her wedding was actually the only reason her dream wedding was possible in the first place. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Rosewood Manor look like something out of a fairy tale. I knew this because I was there at 7 a.m., not as Natalie's embarrassing mother, but as Diana Hartwell, property owner, conducting my monthly inspection with my venue manager, Patricia Miller. Patricia had been running day-to-day operations at Rosewood for 2 years, and she was exceptional at her job. She was also completely unaware that the woman who arranged flowers in the lobby twice a week was the same person who signed her paycheck. The Whitfield Morrison wedding tour is scheduled for 10 this morning. Patricia informed me as we walked through the Grand Foyer Premium Package tour, complete with champagne service, and the full presentation. Mrs. Whitfield specifically requested our most experienced guide. Of course, and what do we know about this particular bride? Patricia consulted her tablet. Natalie Morrison, 28 years old, works in marketing. The groom's family is handling most of the financial arrangements. Apparently, the bride's family situation is limited. According to the notes from Mrs. Whitfield's initial inquiry, the bride comes from a more modest background, single mother, small business owner, Mrs. Whitfield was very specific about wanting to ensure the tour focused on what the Whitfield family could provide, rather than putting any pressure on the bride's family for contributions they might not be able to make. I felt a familiar burn in my chest. Even the venue staff had been briefed on my supposed inadequacy. I see. And what's our booking situation for their preferred date completely open? In fact, we had a cancellation just last week for that exact weekend. The Pemberton family had to postpone their daughter's wedding due to a family emergency. It was quite fortuitous for the Whitfield booking. Patricia had no idea that the fortuitous cancellation had been arranged by me. The moment I learned about Natalie's wedding date, the Pembertons had been graciously accommodated at our sister property in the next county with a significant discount as compensation for the inconvenience. Perfect. I'd like to observe the tour this morning discreetly, of course. I want to ensure our service standards are being maintained for such an important client family. Absolutely. Should I introduce you, if the opportunity arises? No, I said. My mind already forming a plan, I prefer to remain in the background. I'll be in the conservatory during the tour, if anyone asks. I'm just a consultant, working on the garden renovation project at 9:45 a.m. I position myself in the conservatory with a clipboard and a measuring tape, playing the role of a landscape consult through the glass walls. I had a perfect view of the main entrance and could hear everything that happened in the adjoining spaces. The Whitfield party arrived precisely on time in a caravan of expensive vehicle. Bradley's parents, Charles and Eleanor Whitfield, emerged from a silver Mercedes, wearing the kind of understated luxury that screamed old money. Bradley stepped out of a BMW, looking nervous, but excited. Vivian arrived in her own car phone pressed to her ear, managing some crisis that apparently couldn't wait, and then Natalie stepped out of Bradley's passenger seat, and I barely recognized my own daughter. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that I'd never seen before, paired with boots that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair had been styled in an elaborate updo, and she carried herself with a practiced elegance that looked both natural and completely foreign to the girl who used to help me weed flower beds in old jeans and sneakers. But it was her expression that broke my heart. She looked terrified, darling. You look absolutely radiant, Eleanor Whitfield said, though her tone suggested she was making an effort to be encouraging. Are you excited to see your venue beyond? Excited? Natalie replied, her voice pitched higher than usual. I've been dreaming about this place for months. Well, let's see if reality lives up to the fantasy, Charles said, checking his watch. Patricia, wasn't it? We're ready when you are. Patricia appeared with her usual professional warmth, and I watched through the glass as she began the tour with her standard welcome speech about the history and prestige of Rosewood Manor. The group moved through the foyer, admiring the crystal chandelier and marble floors, while I repositioned myself to follow their progress. As you can see, Patricia was saying as they entered the main ballroom, we've maintained all the original architectural details while adding modern amenities. The sound system is state-of-the-art. The lighting can be customized for any mood, and the capacity is ideal for intimate gatherings of up to 200 guests. It's even more beautiful than the photos. Natalie breathed, spinning slowly to take in the room's grand. Bradley, can you imagine our reception here? It's perfect, sweetheart, Bradley replied. But I could see him watching his parents' reactions. More than admiring the space, Eleanor was examining the moldings with a critical eye. The restoration work is quite impressive. Do we know who handled the renovation? I'd want to ensure they used historically appropriate materials. The current owner spared no expense on authenticity, Patricia replied smoothly. Every detail was researched and executed to museum quality. Stan, the chandeliers are original Baccarat crystal restored by craftsmen in Prague. The floors are original heart pine, refinished using traditional techniques, and the gardens. Charles asked the photos suggest quite extensive. 50 acres of designed landscape, including formal gardens, a rose garden, walking trails, and a private lake, perfect for wedding photography. Shall we see them next? As the group moved toward the garden entrance, I heard Vivian whisper something to Natalie that made my blood run cold. "You're so lucky. Bradley's parents are paying for all this. Can you imagine if you had to ask your mother to contribute to something like this? She'd probably have a heart attack just seeing the price list." Natalie's laugh was forced. Mom doesn't really understand this kind of thing anyway. She's more comfortable with simpler events. "Well, it's probably for the best that she won't be at the reception," Eleanor said, apparently having caught the tail end of their conversation. These kinds of formal events can be overwhelming for people who aren't accustomed to them. I'm sure she'll be perfectly happy watching the ceremony and then heading home to whatever it is she does. "Mom keeps herself busy with her flowers," Natalie said, and I could hear the dismissiveness in her voice. She's really found her niche there. Found her niche like arranging flowers was some kind of consolation prize for not being sophisticated enough for real success. The group moved outside and I followed at a distance, pretending to examine the hedge installations while listening to their conversation. "Continue, the rose garden is spectacular," Bradley was saying. "Natalie, didn't you say your mother grows flowers? Maybe she'd appreciate seeing this." There was an uncomfortable pause before Natalie responded. "Oh, Mom's more of a practical garden. She grows the kinds of flowers they sell at grocery stores. This is more artistic. Well, perhaps she could provide some of the simpler arrangements Eleanor suggested for the guest bathrooms or something. It would be a nice way to include her with overwhelming the overall design. Aesthetic, guest bathroom flowers. Eleanor Whitfield was suggesting that my contribution to my daughter's wedding could be providing discount flowers for the toilets." "That's so thoughtful," Natalie said, and she actually sounded grateful for the suggestion. "I'm sure Mom would love to feel useful, like I was some kind of charity case who needed to be thrown scraps to maintain my dignity." "Of course we'd want to approve the selections first," Eleanor continued, "just to ensure they complement the professional arrangements we'll be ordering from the city. Can't have clashing aesthetics, absolutely." Natalie agreed quickly. "I'll make sure Mom understands the color palette and style we're going for." I stood behind a taper, listening to my daughter and her future mother-in-law plan how to manage my participation in the wedding, like I was a potentially embarrassing elderly relative who needed to be handled delicately. But it was what happened next that made me realize this wasn't just about social climbing or wedding anxiety. This was about something much deeper and more damaging. "Speaking of family," Charles said as they approached the lake, "we should discuss the seating arrangements for the ceremony. I assume your mother will want to sit in the front row." "Actually," Natalie said carefully, "I was thinking she might be more comfortable toward the back. You know, where she can make a quiet exit if she needs to. Big crowds make her nervous. And I wouldn't want her to feel trapped if she gets overwhelmed."